Good morning, all. Hope all of you got your coffee, and very happy to start off this day of very interesting talks. So I'm Nitish. I'm a principal data scientist in the London Stock Exchange Group, part of the Sustainable Investment Research team. Let me take this. Yeah. So today I wanted to talk a bit about natural language processing, and in the topic which I am focusing on, which is sustainable finance. Some of you might wonder, what is sustainable finance? It is, obviously a topic which is really hyped up and really sort of the hot topic currently in the space of finance. The general idea of sustainable finance is like defining the process, defining the ways in which investors can bring the topics of environment, social, and governance in their investment process. The main goal here is by having these sort of considerations, you have a long-term vision, a long-term investment goal. It's a very wide topic. It brings together people from the government agencies, from regulations, obviously finance. You bring in insurance. It's a very wide field in the space of finance. So can't go into all the details, but one thing which I think a lot of people talk about is what happened in 2015, which is a Paris Agreement. And the idea there was, on the whole, a lot of people got involved and they signed a treaty telling that our goal is to reduce climate temperature increase by at least 2 degrees by like the end of the century. And if possible, try to reduce it to less than 1.5 degree. Again, I'm using some technical terms here, but the goal here is let's try to manage climate change. So the thing here is there are a lot of things which needs to go in to make this happen. And those are the key market challenges which we all focus on as a community. And soon when I go through this, you'll realize all of them need some sort of data, some sort of NLP, some sort of AI to actually solve it. First one is the idea of disclosures. So in order for investors to know whom to invest on from a sustainability point of view, everybody needs to know what the company is actually doing. What are the activities they're doing? What are some of the actions they're taking to mitigate and solve the climate change problem? So those disclosure requirements and understanding the data which the companies are actually disclosing, very, very important. Next one is, a lot of people can talk about sustainability, but are they actually accurate? Are they actually telling what is actually happening? Totally different ballgame. And I think, again, data science and NLP plays a huge role in that second problem as well. Next comes, okay, you have the data, you have, know what the company is doing on. Now the investment management teams can take over and actually do the investment. Again, data science, AI is again playing a big role in this, like helping investors, helping the asset managers in actually allocating fund in a slightly more algorithmic and systematic way. And the last one is, at the end, we have all these things, but a company, if you're asking a company to become more sustainable, you need to be able to give them some sort of investment, some sort of loans to be able to do the transition to a slightly more sustainable world. That's where all the investment banks and all the general finance providers come into play. And again, data science, AI plays a big role, because for a bank, for an investor to know which project to invest in, it's not straightforward. One needs to have a proper process attached to it. One needs all the correct data to be provided to them to make that correct decision. Again, huge role for data science and NLP. Quickly, before I sort of jump into the use cases, which I think will be very interesting, just wanted to cover my company, which is the London Stock Exchange Group, and what we are currently doing on sustainable finance. And most of it you will see are related to the topic of data. At the end, London Stock Exchange Group had a recent merger with Refinitiv, which is one of the biggest data service provider. So as you can see here, very, very big topic, very hot topic. We have a lot of products related to data and ratings. Some of the ESG scores, which you would see across, there are Refinitiv ESG scores. One of those are the Refinitiv ESG scores. We have certain market sites related products. Yield Book, which is one of our fixed income solutions. Again, I can go into each one of them for a long time, but a lot of data products which we have. Uh, we have a separate sort of like what we call a sovereign rating as well. So at a country level rating, again, market standard product which we manage. The activities, so we have a big data model called the green revenue model, which goes and analyzes companies and decides, okay, all these activities are related to green activities. So again, huge market standard product, which is being used by a lot of investment managers. And then the last one there is the workflow, the index. Again, some of you might know the FTSE Russell indices. They're all, that's under the LSEG umbrella, the London Stock Exchange Group umbrella. The index building process and is driven and powered by the data and by the sort of the techniques from a data science point of view. So again, the biggest advantage of being in a company like London Stock Exchange Group is you have the exposure to a lot of wide range of like users. So the investment management group, that is the asset manager group, corporates, so companies. So some of our solutions, which you'll soon see, are actually directly to the corporates. So as a company, you'll know what your sustainability profile is. So very important like user group for us. And then the financing, as I said, like, all the banks, all the investment managers, they need to know which sort of projects, which sort of companies to invest in. And that's where we get to interact with those users. And our solutions, which we build, the aim is to solve the problems of these like big asset users, asset managers, corporates, and financing these user groups. So where does NLP fit in here? And I might have already alluded to it in the previous points, but I think the biggest point here is there's so much textual data in the finance space. And again, the fundamental data has been used a lot of, it's part of most asset management process. But the textual data, it's actually it's already being used for like a few years, but it's still an untouched market, untouched data. So, and there are a lot of data sets. Again, it's like from a company point of view, you go and see their websites, you'll see how much textual data related to the company you can actually get. So analyzing this might be one of those data sets which is untouched, which means new information about companies. And most of the times, like if you look at the fundamental financial numbers, it comes every quarter, sometimes even every 6 months only. Whereas these textual data, some of these can be available every minute. Like if you look at the news data, for example. So the frequency of information about the companies, it's much easier to get it more often using these sort of textual data. The second one might be a very simplistic point, but I think it's maybe the most important point in some ways, which is for humans to go and analyze companies, there is a limit. There is a ceiling on how much you can do an analysis of. Just imagine that you had to look at 1,000 news for all the S&P 500 stocks on a day-to-day basis, and you have to keep remembering that for a year. It is challenging. It is very, very hard for an analyst to do that and do it accurately. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's where NLP solutions have become very powerful. And you'll, again, in some of the use cases I'll cover, you'll see where this specific point, while again, very simplistic, but very, very important. And the last one here is there's some flavors of information, some types of information, which is hard for, again, a human to come up with a standardized way of analyzing. For example, sentiment. If I tell you, okay, what is the sentiment of a new sort of product which has been launched, like Threads, for example. It's not straightforward. Everybody have their own opinion, own way of analyzing it. So what NLP brings in here is a standard way of analyzing, a standardized way of analyzing it. Again, there are so many ways in which you can do it. Sentiment analysis has been in the market for like almost more than a decade currently from an NLP point of view. But what is important here is you can have, as a company, as an investor, you can define how you want to measure sentiment, and the NLP solution will take care of that. One thing which is very interesting now is it's not enough just to see the text itself, like what has been written. Most of the CEOs and CFOs are very well trained from a media point of view to talk the correct words. But sometimes the tone, the way in which it's being talked about is actually very critical. And this sort of fits in, it's a gray area between NLP and audio analysis. But I think it's becoming even more important. There are a lot of research out there which shows that this sort of analyzing the tone and trying to go into the metadata related to the textual data is very important. And finally, it's a very generic topic of topic modeling. Again, it's the biggest thing is if you're looking at like thousands of pages, to know what are the topics, and not just know what the topics are, what are the important topics, it's not straightforward. And like that's where some of these NLP techniques, the idea of topic modeling has grown really over the last few decades, and some of those solutions which are out there now, very, very powerful, very, very accurate, and it's really helping these users in taking decisions. So obviously, there's no free lunch, and there are difficulties. There are big problems you can face when you're looking at NLP. I'll go through this quite quickly. I think volume, and as I said, with more data comes, the volume becomes tougher to process. And I think this is where some of those other talks about data ops, ML ops in this conference is going to be very, very critical, because without that, there is no quick analysis. And without quick analysis, the benefits of NLP is much lesser. Yeah. There's noise, a lot of noise in data, and a lot of differences in formats. Like even within the news data, for example, we've been doing a project recently. There are thousands of formats based on the source of the news. And again, this is where the data engineering and the data ops, very, very critical. It's at the end, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you do a bad job of processing your news data, you're going to get bad analysis after it. So very, very critical. The third point, very interesting, it has evolved over the last few years, the financial context of language models. Like you can go and see BERT models, and there are a lot of other language models. Very few of them are actually being trained from a financial point of view. Again, this is evolving, and some of the new techniques which are coming out in the market sort of makes it redundant in some ways. But at the same time, it's always better if you have a model which is related to your use case. And I think finance had a difficulty. There are some, as I said, development in the space, but still, it's still not there yet in terms of where you can just do a plug and play and everything works. The last one, maybe more from a trading point of view. I think the idea here is there are these sort of inefficiencies, new information. It's very quick. If you can't trade on them immediately or within a few minutes, it's no longer as important. So again, I'm going to go through this quite quickly again, and these are pretty standard NLP sort of advancements which you might have seen. Again, finance has always been a bit delayed in accepting these sort of NLP sort of solutions due to various reasons. But what is very interesting is how this is proceeded, from a simple embeddings approach which had no context attached to it, like the TF-IDFs and things like that, where you just take a model, a simple model, get the embeddings, and then train a use case based on that. Then came the sort of a context-aware embeddings, where it's not just about, the very common example here is the bank example, where they say, I go to the bank. There it means I'm going to actually the financial bank. But then there is the bank of the river, where it's a different bank there. So again, very common example. And I think this was a big change because you could bring that finance use case into it in some ways, which was very critical for us. But at the end, you still had to go take the embeddings, train a model. If it's a sentiment model, for example, I had to train a sentiment model after that, which again, that means I had to get a lot of data to train it, challenging. What's very interesting is that sort of the last one here, which is the natural language inference sort of project. The idea here is I technically don't need to train a separate use case model. If I can convert my downstream task into a sort of a textual component, then it's just a matter of finding correlations between my input data and that downstream task. This, for me at least, has been a revolutionary thinking in some ways, because I don't need to go and get hundreds of thousands of training data for my sentiment analysis. Here, I can use a language model, use the concept of transfer learning, and then sort of because of how good these large language models are, I need very, very less amount of data to tell the model, okay, what I'm trying to do here is sentiment analysis. Very powerful. Again, I'm not going to go in too detail into this, but very happy to talk about it with anybody who wants to. So I'm going to cover 3 use cases very quickly. The first one is about, again, I've used this word a lot, sentiment analysis. And I think it's very powerful here. we've done this on a lot of different types of data, like the earnings call, transcript of the earnings call, like some of the analyst reports. And the idea here is, on the whole, the person who's spoken about it, or the textual data, who's the source of the textual data, what was that person's sentiment about the company on the whole? And I think what's critical here is, yes, you could do it on the whole document. There are like off-the-shelf solutions for it. But what's more powerful is, can I say, okay, this document had 10 topics, and the sentiment of the company for those 10 topics are this, this, and this. We built a solution on this. It's already available in our LSEG delivery mechanism. And it's been very powerful. I think a lot of people sort of look at it as a forward-looking metric in some ways, which is gold in the space of finance. Yeah. The next use case is the idea of, if I had to link it to the previous topic, which is, in sentiment analysis, I needed to find what the topics are before going and finding the sentiment. But now the question here is, how do I even find the topics? And as I mentioned before, topic modeling has really, really evolved over the last decade, and like some of the ways of doing it now, very, very advanced and very, very accurate. So the idea here is, can I look at a document and say, what are the topics in that document? Sounds easy, but it is complicated, because you will get some of these documents can be like 100 pages, and you're suddenly saying, okay, I can't give you 2,000 topics. I have to bring it down to what is important and what is critical for the use case. And again, from a sustainability point of view, if I go and look at a filing of a company, there's 60, 70 pages, but there'll be maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs about sustainability. How do I find that? How do I tell that these are important topics? Very, very hard. And this is where, obviously, you can use the NLP, importance metrics and all what you can find off the shelf. But what's very important is building sort of your custom importance metrics based on the use case, based on subject matter inputs. Very, very important, very, very powerful. It saves so much time for analysts, for investors for taking their decisions. And again, one very, very specific use case to sustainability. And as I said very briefly before, regulation is a big deal in sustainability, like all these regulators and people who are setting the policies. And it's important from a company's point of view, when they're doing some sort of disclosure, some sort of filings, to follow these regulations and share information based on these regulations. One thing important from both the regulators and the investors' point of view are, okay, the company has given me a filing, very good, but are they actually following the regulations? Are they following the standards? And while it can be, again, done manually by an analyst, could go and read it and say, okay, these 10 questions which are needed by the regulation have been answered. NLP can play a huge role, especially some of the new question answer models, which I'm sure all of you have sort of had some exposure to. It's playing a huge role in this space. Can I give a document and say, okay, these are the 10 main questions which should have been answered. Have they been answered? And these models which are out there, these large language models, are doing an amazing job in this topic. And we are finding it quite useful, and it's a solution which we're trying to bring out soon. And I think it's really a game changer, if I had to call it that way. Again, I went through these use cases very quickly because of the lack of time, but I'll be available after this if you want to have a chat. More than happy to have a chat. Very quickly, I wanted to cover is we talk a lot about these very innovation attached to NLP, attached to AI, but one issue we've always faced in a company like London Stock Exchange is, how do we convert it into that final product? And obviously, the technical components of it, very, very important, which is one of my points. But even before that, there are some questions. How does a data science team communicate with the business team? And one of the main points which I have there is, what is your criteria? What is your evaluation criteria? I can go and say my accuracy of my model is 97%, 98%, but is that good enough? In most of the times, you'll be surprised to hear it's not good enough. You do need to find an evaluation metric which is more product focused, which is more related to the use case, the final use case. And I think we have learned it the hard way in most of our projects, but I think I've soon realized that this is actually a big problem, and we have tried to very actively solve this problem. Next one is these transfer learning models. Again, these off-the-shelf models. they make it sound like it's like magic in some ways, right? You take a model, put an input, you get an output. The world is a better place. But when you do it from a commercial point of view, it's not that straightforward. There are some licensing issues which everybody needs to be careful. The training data which is being used can be very different from the use case which you're looking at. And the final thing is the concept of retraining. Like, these models have been trained on a certain set of data. But if you're building a commercial use case, you're actually trying to keep it like running, ongoing for a long period of time. One very simple example which I always give is the word virus, for example. Until 2019, it might have been material only for the biotech world. But now if you see the virus, it's impacting each one of us, every company in the world. How do you retrain your model? To keep that in mind, very, very critical. Need to have a plan on it from day one. The last one, I'm sure many of you have heard of this, data ops, ML ops people, and I think is the idea of resourcing. Like building that pipeline, building that robust pipeline to handle edge cases, data issues, very, very critical. There's no point of building something which doesn't work more than 4 days in the future. So, and understanding the cost attached to it, again, from a business point of view, very, very important. Thank you. It was very nice talking to all of you. Again, it was a very quick session, but if any of you have any questions, I'll be around. And please do connect with me on LinkedIn as well, and we can. I'd love to hear more about all what you do as well. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Mr. Nitish. Mr. Nitish,